Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 115 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast. Coming to you live-ish from halftime of one of the most boring games in NFL history. It's 6-3 at this point. Denver is winning, I guess. So hopefully you're here watching because you're just trying to stay awake and maybe you have some fantasy stakes in the second half. If you're listening on podcast, we're a big fan of you. Thank you for listening. But you already know the game sucked, so you don't need to worry about it. But in the B chair with me tonight is my friend Scott Sidler. Scott, how are you tonight?
Going on, man? Normally I'm very annoyed. Oh, why do we do this on Thursday nights? I'm trying to watch football. Honestly, this is saving me from watching this game. So, you know what? This is awesome. And we have a great guest, so it's going to be an awesome show.
It's going to be a good time. I'm really looking forward to it. And speaking of the guest, we've got, I kind of want to say the one and only Calvin and Hobby. The one and only Calvin Shoemake from DLF. Cal, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. And I like to envision a future where someone is listening to this episode via podcast and they're like, what? That game was the best ever. It had the best second half in the history of the NFL. That's what I'm hoping is happening right now as someone's listening.
If that's happening and you're listening to this, whenever it is, tweet us. Be like, you guys are idiots. This was the best game ever. What are you talking about? I will gladly eat crow on that one if that becomes the case, because this first half has been brutal to watch. And we're not going to talk about it other than this, because it doesn't matter. And it's Thursday Night Football, which we go live on Thursday every week. And if you're not watching us live, you should. Come watch us at YouTube. Come follow the tubes of the U and follow us at DAP_network on Twitter. And you can find us live every week on YouTube on Thursdays. So, gentlemen, I gotta be honest, through 4 weeks, I'm having a good year. I feel like I'm having one of the better years of my fantasy life, but at the same time, these weeks are flying by. Does anybody else feel like it's crazy that we're already heading into week 5? Is it just me? Anybody?
Definitely
that's
not.
what I thought.
I always feel that way. I feel like we're gonna blink. We're gonna blink and it's gonna be like, oh yeah, it's fantasy playoffs time. Like it's time to, get your rosters ready. What's the schedule look like? It goes by so fast, and then we get to the off season and we get to do it all over again.
Yeah, and honestly, the non-point scoring season has it's I get it. It's one of my favorites. I get why Russ calls it that. There's a whole different vibe to it, But when you're in season, you're actually scoring points and you're putting up a record and you're playing against everybody else head to head and you're setting lineups and you're doing waivers. It's a grind. Don't get me wrong. But it's fun. The whole reason we play this game is to do this, right? Mm-hmm. That's the whole point. So before we get too deep into this, before we get into the weeds, let's go trim those weeds. We are now officially sponsored by Manscaped. As you've heard, if you listen to the podcast, Dynasty Junkies, proudly sponsored by Manscaped. And I got to be honest, support for Dynasty Junkies brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below the waist grooming. Your products are precision engineered tools for your family jewels. I always botch that, but it's so true. Their performance package that we got, and Scott, I know you're just still on the way. I'll be honest, this is the best gear I've ever gotten. I'll put it that way. I don't want to get too crazy, but this is serious. These guys are legit. This 4.0 is legit. And I really recommend any guys out there who are kind of thinking about it, on the fence, or hearing these Manscaped reads for a while. It's totally worth it. The everything Dynasty Junkies at the checkout gets you 20% off and free shipping. Highly recommend it. I don't even need to get into it at this point. We've kind of gone off the rails on this in the last few weeks. I just think anybody who listens to this, if you don't already have the performance package, you don't already have a Manscaped trimmer, go do yourself a favor, man. I'm telling you, it's totally worth it. They have helped 6 million men worldwide. And again, by my math, that's 12 million balls. I just love saying that. It's so funny. But I just want to make sure that we're clear about this. Dynasty Junkies is the code at podcast. Dynasty Junkies. The code, when you get to the end, Dynasty Junkies. With that being said, let's move on quickly to week 4. Now, we were off last week. We had a hiatus week. We need a little break. The Junkies were a little tired. We needed a rest up. But we're back hard and ready to go this week. Let's go. Week 4. And Javonte Williams gets a really bad ACL injury, and he's out. And probably for the season and maybe even part of next season at this point, because ACLs are still a 12-month recovery, not 24, 12-month recovery. We're looking at, even J.K. Dobbins was out a couple weeks. Cal, I want to shoot it to you first. I mean, just what do you think about this Javonte Williams thing? Is this something that worries you for him long term? Are you buying him in Dynasty if you're rebuilding? Where are you at with Javonte?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this, as I told you in the group chat that we've got, because this is such a fascinating thing to me that there's two different parts of. One has to do with the injury itself. And so like, just to talk about that, like how we feel about Javonte, the player, is very different from how I want to manage my roster surrounding him and his injury. And so the first part, if we just focus on the player himself, there's so many things we cannot control. We have no idea. Is he going to bounce back in the way that Saquon did, where he came back, but he wasn't the quote unquote, big uppercase loud Saquon Barkley that we're getting right now. That's fun to watch. Could it take a couple of years? Are we going to get the J.K. Dobbins where yes, he was back. He scored a couple touchdowns. We were happy for fantasy, but he didn't look great. Like it wasn't like he didn't have the same pop that he normally has. Nobody is Adrian Peterson where you come back and win the rushing title 8 months later or whatever it was.
One guy. Yeah.
And so we just don't know. And so I think there's this other part of it where there's a mental aspect to it, right? Like we're looking at that with James Robinson and Akers, and we got the comments from McVay where he's like, oh, the mental side of this is part of where Cam Akers is struggling. That's not exactly what he said, but paraphrasing what he said there. James Robinson, on the other hand, is going after it. And that makes sense because we know when you come back from injuries, the mental side of it, do I trust my knee? Do I trust my ankle? Do I trust this? There's a huge component of the mental side. And we don't think about or talk about that part of it enough because it's uncomfortable and we can't measure it. Right. Yeah. But that's a part of this whole thing. We have zero control over how Javonte Williams is going to handle his 25th day in a row of doing rehab and up at 5 a.m. to do something that he needs to do. Right. We don't know how that's going to go for him. And I think because we have no control over that, I think we have to focus on the other side, which I think is the more interesting part, which is where you see the difference between somebody really smart like Dynasty Trade Calculator Izzy talking about hang on to him, right? And then Addison with DLF and Scott Connor and some of those guys, that we know who are no, sell him for a first now. And that's not a difference in how they feel about Javonte. That's a difference in how they manage their dynasty rosters.
Correct.
And that is what is so fascinating to watch to me. And what we have to do is be careful not to pick which one we agree with based on how we like the player. We have to have a plan and understand what our plan is for our dynasty roster and not just pick and choose how we're going to apply it. And that's what they're staying true to their method. And that's why you're hearing them, because this is what they believe in. And there are different ways to win. They both are great dynasty players, right? Great dynasty analysts, but they're approaching this very different ways. If that makes sense.
No, but you're putting it perfectly because it's not just the injury it's not he's out. Let's say he's out 14 months. Let's pick a time frame. He's out 14 months. What does that do to his value? That's not how it goes, because how you value him could be very different than how someone else in your league values him. And how Scott and Izzy and everybody else, all these guys that have been doing this for a while that we all looked up to and trust and respect and all this, there is no wrong way to do this. And I think a lot of times, and this is a bigger topic we don't need to get into, but I think sometimes, especially when it comes to, off season and speculative things about who's going to do what, it becomes this weird pissing contest where somebody wants to be he's going to do this and he's going to be fine. It's okay, we don't know that. And so that risk, that unknown, is different weighted for different people, right? There are definitely people out there. And I think, and I'm not even trying to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think there are definitely a lot of fantasy players that like risk and walk right straight flat into risk. And they're give me the risk. I want the risk. But they're not going to send Saquon Barkley for Javonte Williams. You know what I'm saying? They're going to buy risk low. They're going to take a chance on that risk and say, okay, I know there's risk. I want the risk, but I'm not going to send you my entire house for that risk. They're going to buy the risk at a certain level that makes sense to them as a risk profile. And that's where it gets to be really tricky, because all of us in this, on this podcast, and all of us in this room, so to speak, are content creators and try to give advice to people. And it's there is no one answer. There just isn't. You know what I mean? As much as we want there to be, everybody wants there to be an obvious, we'll sell or buy, or that's not true. If you tell me somebody's going to send, let's say I don't have it. I'll say this. I've said this before. I don't have any Javonte Williams on any teams of all of my teams. I have no shares of Javonte, which is way too expensive for me. The price is coming down now. I'm thinking of buying Javonte Williams. What am I sending? I'm willing to send a 23 first. Like, again, to that whole, Addison Hayes and hold that whole thing. I'm willing to send a 23 first for Javonte Williams. If it's a late first, right? If I'm contending and I'm thinking I might have a good guy, because it could be worth that. Now, that could be a terrible trade in a year. And I think this is where it comes back to where it kind of haunt people too. Is like, I don't want to be over my skis a little bit and like oversell things and like tell people bad things. All you can do is guess. That's literally what this game is at this point. I mean, Scott, you have 50 teams or whatever. How many Javonte shares did you have across your entire portfolio?
9.
9. So, okay, so what are you doing with it? And again, it's not this easy of like, what are you doing with those 9? But like on teams where you're contending and you lose Javonte Williams, what are you looking for in a trade? And again, overly generalized, but that's kind of what we're going for here.
Large towel for my tears, pretty much. I mean, I love Javonte, and it sucks, man. It sucks. Like, I'm super bummed for him. But that's that's part of the game. Like, honestly, this year is crazy. And I think Izzy said this. Like, can you name another year where we went like a whole preseason and then a whole month into the season where like a super relevant player? It's like Tim Patrick's like kind of the only one I can think of that tore an ACL. Like, there's been a couple other injuries, but I mean, obviously like Dak and some of those players, but like a tore an ACL and is definitely out for a whole year. Like, obviously we're going to see Dak back this year, right? So yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, normally I'm looking at those as buying opportunities. Going back to Dak when he got hurt a couple of years ago and he missed all that time, I bought so many shares. And I've done that pretty consistently with all the positions other than running back. So right now, I'll give you an example. Actually, in the Junkies listener league, Rocky and I got an offer for. We have Javonte. We're currently, I think, first place in the league, and we're obviously contenders, right? And we don't have a lot of depth, so that's the issue. Is like, okay, we have a pretty solid starting lineup, but we don't have a ton of depth. So how are we going to weather the bye weeks and injuries?
To clarify, it's a 14-team league too, so depth is harder to come by.
Right. Yep. And so, we got an offer, for a top running back, but it's like we had to add 2 seconds onto it. So that to me is, if we were 6 weeks ago, let's say, I would have seen it as the other way around. Like, that running back would have had to come with the seconds to get Javonte. So my explanation to Rocky of why I wouldn't do the trade is because, I shouldn't be giving up the 2 seconds now. We're only doing that because we're behind now because we lost that player. So we want to get points in our lineup.
It's a tax.
So and I'm less willing to make that move. I just think there's opportunity to use those picks and add points in other ways, as opposed to just getting an older player at the same position, and kudos to the team that offered us that. It was a great offer. It was genius. And I will be doing that in other leagues. You can bet I will be the guy making those offers too. But as far as rostering Javonte and what to do with him, I mean, it's a really tough decision. If you can get someone you like similarly, and maybe you have to cross positions, maybe you have to go to wide receiver and then you backfill that running back void. That's certainly something to think about. It's going to be an 8 to 12 month thing, right? And probably closer to 12. Closer to 12. So 11 months from now as we start the next season. And so could he be back? Sure. But these guys usually aren't 100% right away. And we've seen that a lot. So getting the points now, if you can get fair value, but if you have to pay the tax, it's a hard thing to do. I'd almost rather hang on to him. His value is not going to get any lower. I mean, this is it.
That's actually what I wanted to pivot into.
It's going to take this hit now. And then as time goes on, it's going to get, as we get closer to that timeline. So if you have a chance in 4 weeks from now to make a trade and you can go all in for the championship, I'm maybe more willing to do so then, but not right now. It's a little too early for me on that.
Yeah, I think the best buy time actually for me is probably going to be just before your trade deadline. If you have a contender that has Javonte on their bench and they're like, oh, what am I going to do with this player that I've got right here? And I think they're going to be the most desperate to sell that player at that point. So if you do want to strike, I mean, like, you could miss out too, because somebody else could just make a better offer than you before, but be patient and stay consistent. That's what, just going back to what I was saying, like, have a process, understand your process, and then, like, don't deviate. Like, so Izzy is basically like, I'm going to hang on to him and I'm going to get a first and a second for him before he comes back. And Scott is like, I'm going to sell him for a first right now. And so, like, it's not that big of a difference if you really think about it. It's just timing. And it's also, Izzy trusts himself to be able to, in his leagues, find the right time to make that trade. And Scott's like, I'd rather the roster flexibility. I get my first and I have a roster spot for the next, 8 months that you don't have. Exactly. And I think it's a different philosophy. One of them would have hit on Adrian Peterson. One of them would have missed out on him.
Yeah.
One of them would have hit on, would have been right about, I guess, like Saquon could have maybe bought him in that year after, because his value didn't go up. It went down once he got back to the field. Akers, like, one of them would have sold him and only got a second or something, when he first went down, and versus, there was a time when you could have got a first. It's just how much do you trust you're going to be able to find the right time? You're going to have the right league mate to sell them to. You're going to have, like, there's a lot of things in there that you have to consider, because likely you are the highest in your league on that player because you have them, right?
You already have them, right? Well, I wanted to run through some of this because we can spend forever. I agree. We can spend 3 hours talking about this because it's such a juicy topic, but I did want to get into some of this because there have been some trades since the injury, right? So looking at DLF Trade Finder, there are some trades that make sense and some trades that don't. And I'm filtering by 12-team Superflex. Like, let's just cut out the other, let's just make it a little bit more interesting. Not saying that there's anything negative on those others. Just this is what most leagues are, I think, these days. Javonte Williams or Joe Mixon? Scott, who do you want? Javonte Williams or Joe Mixon? No about contender. We don't know about anything. Javonte Williams or Joe Mixon?
Yeah, no, it is. It's contender. I'll take Mixon, and if I'm not a contender, then I don't want to score the points, so I'll take Javonte. Yeah, I'll hold him. Yeah.
Cal, you in the same way?
I like Joe Mixon enough that, to me, that's like, I think he's still going to hold value next year, and I get the points now too. So I don't know that their value is going to be that much different in 8 months. So I'll take Joe Mixon. I know he's older, but there's just there's a lot. You got to also factor in Denver. They weren't happy just having Javonte this year healthy. They brought in Melvin Gordon. So what are they going to do? I don't know if Hackett's even going to still be the coach, but, like, it's if he is
the answer, like,
choices right now.
What about this one? Javonte Williams or Rashad White, a 23 second and a 23 fourth. That's not enough for me to give up Williams.
No.
Like, to your point earlier, Scott, like, I'm fine holding him at that price, right? There's another one. There's two of these trades on here, which this one is worthy of a couple minutes in my book. Javonte Williams or Dameon Pierce?
No. Sorry. Still keeping Javonte.
Williams. Yes, because I think Javonte Williams is much more likely to have a starting job handed to him next season.
Here's the twist, though. If I can sell Dameon Pierce for Javonte Williams, I'm doing that in a heartbeat. Like, I would gladly take Javonte Williams. So what I'm thinking is, again, these are real leagues with real people making real decisions, right? And there are people out there. And again, I'm not saying in every league. I'm not saying in your league if you're listening. I'm saying send an offer. If you've got Dameon Pierce and the guy just lost Javonte Williams, send it 1-for-1 and see what happens, right? What's the worst that happens? He says no? I would gladly take Javonte in Dynasty. Like, that's not even a real question to me. But it's happening a couple times, right? Like, that's no joke. Here's another one that kind of blew my mind a little because of how players are valued. Javonte Williams and Curtis Samuel for Aaron Jones. Like, Aaron Jones is one of those guys in Dynasty that nobody wants. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's got a ticking clock. A.J. Dillon's right there. But I was like, you're telling me I could send Aaron Jones and get both of those players back? I'm fine doing that. Like, almost even if I'm contending, I'll figure it out because I can sell Javonte to somebody else, right? And this is what we talk about a lot on Junkies. Is like, it's never just one trade. Just get the value. Like, do something that makes sense. So again, for someone like myself who does not have any Javonte Williams shares, now is your time to strike. And we kind of hit on this, and I want to wrap it up with this. This is probably the cheapest he's going to be because there are people freaking out and overreacting and buying somebody for their contending title this year or whatever. And in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, that price is going to be higher than right now. Guarantee you. Even if you're contending, I'd rather have the guy cheaper. And then in a month, 2 months, like you said, Calvin, when we get to the trade deadline, sell Javonte for 2 firsts. I guarantee you there'll be somebody out there that sends 2 firsts, 2 late firsts, right? A 23 and a 24 first for Javonte. It'll happen. It's crazy, but it'll happen because somebody out there be like, oh, these are not my picks. I don't really care. Like, it's going to happen. I would gladly take some of that. Like, so just buy Javonte on the cheap, but that doesn't mean you still send valuable offers. Like, don't be a dick about it. But I just want to say, like, there is so much chaos around Javonte Williams, so much risk that we can go on and on. We've hit on this pretty good, but I just want to say, send us your trades. If you have somebody that is selling Javonte Williams for less than you thought or more than you thought, or if you have him, tag us on Twitter. We'd love to be in those polls and kind of give you some advice because no 2 leagues are alike, and this is the prime case for that. There is no wrong way to manage your team. There is no wrong decision here. Just go do what you got to do, but don't sell in a panic. Never panic sell. I will say that to people I've had, and I'm sure we all have, I've had people DM me. They're like, should I sell Javonte Williams for Jonathan Taylor? And I'm like, yes, gladly. Like, well, Jonathan Taylor's out. I'm like, doesn't matter. That's an upgrade. You're doing great. Yes. Like, just keep your focus on the prize here. What are we doing? So any other thoughts on Javonte before we move on? I know we hit on that a pretty good amount, but any other thoughts before we call it a day on that topic? Because we can go on forever.
I'm just rooting for him. I hope he comes back strong.
Same.
Better.
So. I love it. Same. And it's hard to talk about players in fantasy and not think about them as people. They are people. This is a rough injury. I really do feel for him. That's not easy to recover from. Well, that's okay. You got me on that one, Scott. But with that, and that segue is kind of true. Taylor is out this week, right? Jonathan Taylor is not playing in this game that we're all kind of watching, I guess. So Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he's missing this week. I doubt that he misses that much time. I mean, all the reports are kind of like, I don't know. He's not really going to be out a while. So I'm not really that worried about Jonathan Taylor. So I actually had somebody in my DMs this week that's like, should I sell Josh Jacobs for Jonathan Taylor? And I was like, oh, yeah, please. Like, I would gladly send Jonathan Taylor. Now, this was a redraft question, but I still think it's true for anything. Like, this is the time to strike for Jonathan Taylor owners, right? Like, if you're a Jonathan Taylor manager and you're looking at, and maybe now a little bit too late, but still, like, you put him on IR, he's not starting for you. If you're looking at it like, man, my next running back is Antonio Gibson, and that clock is ticking quick. Like, I've got Antonio Gibson on a couple rosters, and I'm like, Brian Robinson is coming back, and he is knocking down the door without even playing a game. Like, that is brutal. So, like, if you've got somebody like that, or you've got Damian Harris with Ramondre Stevenson there, or you've got, I don't know, pick a running back that's just running backs are weird. Like, I would gladly go get Taylor. And I guess, Scott, what are your thoughts on Taylor? Is this ankle injury make you worried? Are you panicking at all? Or is this just kind of like a blip on the radar?
No, I just think anytime you have these performances, it's an opportunity. Right now with the production of like Chase and Higgins, right? People are questioning, is Chase even really the one? Who cares? Buy them both. Like, let's go. Like, if there's an opportunity, just get them.
Gladly take Chase as the 2. Taylor, that's fine with me.
And we were talking before the game, like, or before we started here watching the game, and just saying, like, what happened to Indy's line? They were supposed to be so good, and like you have this, they have a new quarterback and they're trying to figure some things out, and they're running some different plays, and they have some new people on the outside, and they're just trying to make some changes, right? And so it'll come together. Like, it's still a good line. It's still the same guys. They're still talented. It's still the same offense. Like, we know what he's capable of. So if there's any sort of buying opportunity, people are so overreactive and way too short-sighted when we get to this time of year. And you should react to new information. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but when we're talking about these elite players, if there's any crack in that door, you go and you buy. It will work out more often than not.
Cal, you on the same page?
I think people are missing the big picture, like along with what you guys are saying. I think that so every week I do a box score scouting thread on Twitter just because it's fun for me. But like I always notice these things, and like I this past week, I just went back and looked. Like, I kind of remember JT being a little bit of a slow starter the last couple of years. Like, I wonder where he was after 4 weeks, in his first 2 seasons. And so in 2020, he was RB 16 after 4 weeks, had 56 fantasy points. 2021, he was RB 20, 52 and a half. And right now, through 4 weeks, RB 22 at 50.2. So within like less than 6 point difference through 4 weeks, all 3 seasons. Now the ankle injury complicates it, but this has happened every year for him. And I think people are maybe just paying a little bit more attention because he's JT and he finished number 1 and he drafted him number 1.
He hasn't missed a game, or he hasn't missed a practice in 30 years or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an island game. I think that helps, right? Like, I think honestly, I was looking at this all this week. I'm like, if this was a Sunday game, Taylor'd be playing, right? Like, I don't think anybody's. Again, we don't know. We're not examining the body. We probably. But I think in all honesty, like, it was a Thursday game against a Javonte-less Denver team. Like, why risk it? Like, Thursday games are weird anyway. Like, whatever. So I'm not that worried about Taylor. Let's pivot into some of these other guys. And these are some players that are out, which. I mean, again, I get it, and it stinks, and there's IR versus out. But we got Cordero Patterson to IR. Tua is definitely out for week 5. Looks like Burks is missing this game. I mean, Kenny Golladay. Oh, my God. I have him on so many. I'm just kidding. Nobody cares about Kenny Golladay. But for Bobby's sake, Bobby, if you're listening, Kenny Golladay is out this week. I don't think he's going to play, and it just makes me laugh.
Kenny Golladay still plays?
Yeah, is he still in the NFL?
Barely. But are we worried about Tua? Let's just pivot into that for a hot second before we move on. But like, is Tua something that in Dynasty, is his value taking a dip for you, Calvin? Like, is it one of those, like, Tua is now like he's injury prone, or he's had this bad concussion and that's going to come back? Is it like, are you nervous about Tua in Dynasty for Superflex or no?
I'm absolutely nervous, but like, I don't know if there's anything actionable about that. Like, I was so in on Tua coming, so I have so many shares, but like, you can't do anything with it right now. Like, I just don't think you can. There was some tweet about him, like, the guy that the movie on concussions that Will Smith was in, there's recommending him to retire or something, or, like, and who knows if that's even real. I don't know. Like, but there's just so much stuff out there, and I just feel for him because, like, and I just think the NFL has got to, not to get off on a total tangent, but they got to figure something out with this. It takes it out of the player's hands, because what is he supposed to do if a doctor clears him? The way they have, like, pulled him in and out of the lineup for 2 years for his entire career, is he going to make the decision that I'm going to sit out? No, like, he's going to
the player never should. Like, right? They should always be out of the player's hands. It should never be up to the player. I agree.
I think if this was like Chicago, never for a second was like anybody but Mitch Trubisky is our guy. Mitch Trubisky, okay. And Miami's been jerking Tua around for 2 years. Like, I just think this is a bad situation. And I'm glad the NFL investigated him. I don't know if they just found a scapegoat and like that's all that this was with the independent neurologist. Hopefully they have handled this correctly. But like, they got to find a way to take it out of the player's hand where the player doesn't have to make that choice to risk the rest. Like, so this is personal to me because I actually have I had concussions in high school. I struggled with them and got multiple. We didn't know what they were. And so I had a bunch of them like in a short amount of time. And so this is personal to me, but like, I just think they've got to find a way to take it out of the player's hands. And
you're a prime case then. So like, if you had a concussion and they said, hey, you had a concussion and we don't want you to play, would you fight? You'd be like, no, I'm fine. Like, wouldn't you be like, yo, I'm good. I can do this. Like, you don't want to let the team down. You don't let the coaches down. You're like, I'm ready to go, coach, put me in, right? Like, you're not going to say no. Why would you say no? That makes no sense.
To any player that talks about it. Danny Amendola was on Bill Simmons' podcast this past week talking about how him and Julian Edelman would have this thing where they would kind of hold each other up and let them gather themselves and make it look like they were celebrating. And like, they figure out these tricks and these ways around it. And I just think the NFL has they got to find this right here. They need to understand that this Tua's life is like changed. If he had 2 concussions in 4 days, it's changed.
Yes.
Like
forever.
Yeah. And they need to feel
you can't
the weight
undo
of that.
A concussion. Yeah.
Yes. They need to feel the weight of that.
Well, and you can't unring that bell. Like they always talk about it being like a bell got rung, like, but you can't unring that bell. You can't just sit down now and be like, oh, we're fine now. No, those 2 bell rings in 4 days is going to change his brain forever.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I'm not getting political, but Herschel Walker had a number of bell rings and he is not himself. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of NFL players that have seen this. Like,
non-NFL players. Me.
Just saying.
I had like it shows up on a brain scan of me.
Yes.
Like I just had one 2 years ago, and it still shows up as like that. It notices exactly where it was, which part of my brain that it affects. Like it is a real problem. That again, like we didn't know. They know.
No, of course.
Like they know.
That makes it worse if you know and don't do anything, as opposed to the no offense, Cal, I'm guessing in the 80s and 90s, and you know when I'm just kidding, but like whenever
90s, yes,
whenever in the 90s when this was happening, like even in the NFL, like the concussions weren't a big thing, right? Like it was like, oh, you got his bell rung, he'll be fine. It wasn't a big deal. We are much more advanced from there and still don't know anything. That's what's crazy to me about this is that like there's so much that we know that people are still like, what the heck happened? And again, I was at the game last week as a Bengals fan, obviously, and you know, it was brutal to watch. They did not replay it at all in the stadium, which I respected, and we were all everybody at the Bengals game, and I'm not even being, I don't think I'm being overly generous here. I think everybody was like, why is Tua playing? I don't think anybody in their right mind was like, Tua should definitely play. And then when he went down with that injury on what was a hard hit, but a very legal hit, it was nothing illegal. There was no penalty. I don't think there was any reason to throw a flag there. He just took a hit, as quarterbacks do, and it didn't matter how hard it was because he had just gotten his bell rung, quote unquote, you know, a couple days prior, and it was just brutal. And when it happened and everybody kind of freaked out and the whole stadium kind of got hushed, and I mean, again, people probably saw it live and everything, and I was glad I didn't get to see it. We were, I mean, in the end zone, we were in the stands. We didn't get to see what was happening with his hands and everything. It was terrifying because honestly, we all knew it was coming. And that's what's wrong about this. And that's why I'm looking at it like someone needs to step in because Tua was probably like, I'll go in. They cleared me. I'll go in. You should never have been cleared.
Never. And again, what's he supposed to do? If he says like, no, I'm not going to go in. Now he's soft. Now he's right.
There's
like
no winning.
I worked for a company. I don't work for them anymore, but I used to work for a company. I won't name them, but like there was just this toughness, right? Like you show up to work no matter what. Like, and so I'm in Louisiana and it was literally 3 times in my life, it has snowed where it like gathers on the ground. 3 times in my life. This is one of those days, the biggest one ever. Yeah. And that like this guy, my boss is like, why aren't you on your way yet? And I'm like, I don't know how to drive in the ice. What are you talking about? I've never experienced this before.
Nobody does.
I had to, right? It's like look, I don't want to go get out there and like tow trucks made so much money that day because there were so many people in the ditches. But like, I didn't have a choice. It's like, okay, well, if I want my job, I got to go put myself in harm's way because this is the culture. And I think that's what has to change. The culture is, it's got to change, and that's hard to do. But like,
it's not going to happen overnight. Yeah,
that's where we got to start.
Any thoughts on this, or we kind of summarized, where you are with this?
No, I mean, I can relate having 2 concussions playing football, and there's not a goddamn thing you could have done to get me out of the game. So, and now we didn't know. Okay. So that was how it was back then. So I agree with everything here. But it's crazy to me, and I don't know if this is common knowledge. I mean, maybe, because it's been talked about a lot, and I can't remember where I heard this, but essentially, somebody explained how the players just can beat the test, right? Like they know what to say and how to, and presumably
they mess up their baseline, which was is that a lot of players do that.
It was my back spasmed, and that's what caused me to we're not saying that's what Tua said, but they're just saying if he had said that, what's the doctor supposed to do? Because that's the dilemma of, well, do you believe your patient, or do you what are you supposed to do? Be like, oh no, I don't believe you. What do you do there? So it's a no-win scenario, which is why there's gotta be another way. With all the technology and all the things we have going on in healthcare nowadays, there just has to be another way.
Well, and I mean, again, I think we all agree, and we can move on after this, but it can't be in the players' hands, obviously. I don't even think it should be in the team's hands, because I think that just adds too much of a layer of impropriety and being like the team wants him to play. And I know, and again, nothing against any Dolphins fan, but I had a lot of Dolphins fans like, if Tua had played, then we would have beat you. And I'm like, well, there's no guarantee of that. And I think at the same time, you're part of the problem in a way. Like he had a concussion. I'm pretty sure he had a concussion. I'm not diagnosing, but I'm pretty sure he had a concussion on Sunday. And then they ruled him out with a back injury. And then he's like, no, my back's fine now. And he's back in. That's risky. And then playing him on Thursday is such a short-sighted decision. I don't see the benefit. So I'm looking at it like it sucks that it happened. I really hope Tua is okay. I hope that his life is okay. I hope that he doesn't have to retire from this. I hope that in 30 years, we don't look back on this and just go, what the hell were we thinking, right? Because again, the technology and science and everything is coming every day. Like we're getting better. We're getting smarter. So I just hope that this isn't like detrimental to his life, like we were saying, because I really do like Tua. I hope he's good. But yeah, there's no way in hell that he's going to say, no, coach, I can't go in. I got a little dizzies. Like, no, he's not going to do that. He's just, why would you do that? So anyway, that's the wrap up from week 4. I think we've covered it more than enough. There's a lot of fun stuff. And again, we were off last week, so we got to catch up a little. But let's get into the main topic, which I do think this is kind of the time of season when people start asking questions. Which way do I go? What are we doing here? I am now 0-4. I'm 1-3. I'm 2-2. Whatever it is. Which way do we go? Which way do we look at this and say, all right, where are we at with this? And I know, Scott, you're in a ton of leagues. Cal, I'm sure you're in a ton of leagues too. I know I am. Is 4 weeks enough to determine where your team is determined to finish, like destined to finish? Like, Scott, let's start with you. I know we've talked about this before. After 4 weeks, are you looking at your rosters and going, all right, where are we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've only been able to say that anecdotally in the past until last year. Our good friend Jordan McNamara came out with the Analytics of Dynasty and then the Analytics of Dynasty Rebuilding Guide. And so his Twitter handle is @McNamara Dynasty. And you can you should check out the Analytics of Dynasty. But if you're just doing a rebuild, check out the Rebuilding Guide. Okay, because he does a study and he puts the data behind what I've been able to say here anecdotally over the last several years. And essentially the first 3 weeks, without giving away everything in here, it's basically after the first 3 weeks, 74% of the teams in the top half of total points after week 3, okay, not even week 4, after week 3, won 7 or more games in the fantasy season. Now, again, we may have an extra game now because we're 17. So this was done in a previous year, right? So maybe week 4 is a little bit more appropriate. But that tells you right there, basically 75% chance. If you're not in the top 6 in points, regardless of your record, you're probably not a contender.
If you're not getting 7 wins, you're not in the playoffs, and therefore you better go to the bottom. I agree. Yeah, nobody wants to finish 9th. That is never a goal. You want to finish 6th at the best, and then maybe 12th, and then 5th. You know what I'm saying? Like, squeak me in the playoffs and see if I can do it. But I do not want to finish 7th. That is the worst place. No. 8th, 7th. Yeah.
Exactly right. So I think something I'm going to try this year for myself is just pushing some of those teams more towards getting into the playoffs, but it's going to come down to this threshold of looking at the points. And then you really do have to analyze each league. There isn't one hard and fast rule because sometimes you do have that perfect storm of injuries and, I'm getting Dak back. And then I also have Watson who's coming back and whatever, you know what I mean? There could be 58 million scenarios. So you do have to analyze each league. And so that's really what I'm doing. Starting last week, this week, and through next week, I will be going through all my leagues and analyzing the whole league, not just my team, but also the whole league in points, in record, and then looking at, did somebody already jump ahead and is already, beat me to the rebuilding? A lot of teams are already rebuilding because of the 23 class. So if you decide all of a sudden to rebuild now, you might already have 4 teams that are essentially you have a 1 out of 8 chance instead of 1 out of 12 of making the playoffs. You might as well just go and see what happens. And it doesn't mean you have to trade away your future assets or trade away your youth or anything like that. It just means, hey, once the playoffs happen, anything is possible. So if you're going to if your best case is 105, maybe don't rebuild, right? Like you might as well just get in the playoffs and see what happens. You never know.
Well, okay, so let's pause there for a second because aiming for 105 is a bad idea. Nobody is aiming for 7th place, right? Nobody wants that. But I definitely have had a few teams over the years that I'm like, you know what? I might get lucky enough. I'm starting 2-2. I'm kind of like, I'm 7th in scoring, but it's been kind of a wonky start as every season is. Right. I feel like it's the most evergreen tweet ever. This is the weirdest year ever, isn't it? Like, no, every year is just different than what we expect. So I'm saying, like, if you're 2-2, if you're 1-3, you're 3-1. If you're 3-1, I feel like you've already banked 3 wins. You're pretty much going in. Like, in my logic is like, if I'm 3-1, I'm going for them playoffs. All I got to do is win 4 out of the next 10 weeks at this point. Like, I can probably win 4 out of the next 10 because of the way the season extended. If I'm 2-2, I got to win 5 out of the next 10. That's 50-50. I can probably win 50-50 with buys coming up. We'll be all right. But I do think that if you're 1-3, you really have to take a look at your team and be like, all right, can I turn this around? Like, is there something that I can do? Is there a trade that I can make? Is there a couple of trades? Do I have a lot of draft picks and I can donate those for points now to turn this around? Or is it legitimately just too late and I need to tank? And I think 1-3 is the hardest spot for me personally. If I'm 1-3, but I'm 4th in scoring, that's brutal, right? Where it's like, man, I can still do this. You know what I'm saying? But like, I don't know. What do you think, Cal? If you're 1-3, let's say you're 1-3 in a really competitive league, it's a 12-team league, and you're, 7th in scoring, 1-3. It's been a wonky year. What are you doing with your team in general? What are your thoughts?
That's one of the most fascinating ones. I've actually got I have 5 different categories I put my teams in right now, and that fits into the 4th of the 5. And so that's like if I'm 1-3, or if I'm 1-3, but I'm like, top 3-ish. So I say top 3, but if you're like right there, a few points away from 3 or something like that, maybe you missed a Monra for a week or something like that.
Right.
That is where I am actively shopping for upgrades in any area of deficiency. So like your margin of error has shrunk. I am still at this point hesitant to use my first, but I'm willing to take on more risk in this situation than I would in others. I want to be smart and I want to be I want to be careful about the way I approach it still to some degree, but I also have to have a little bit of if I slip up at all this season, even though I've got all these points, I'm going to end up 105, 106 with all these great points, but I'm in the middle and I'm not going to get a great asset for next year, whatever.
Participation trophy is all yours, Cal. Yeah.
Sometimes that happens, but that to me, is the other one to me that's really hard is if you're 2-2 and if you're kind of in the middle of points scored and because you're right there and you can make a case either way. And I think this is where you have to be really honest with your roster. If you've got descending assets on your team, if it's you got Derrick Henry and Devonta Adams and you've got those kind of players who are they're producing and they're able to get you some wins some week, but they're from here forward they're going to lose value for sure. That is just happening. Then I think now that's value wise, not points wise. Value wise, there's a difference, but they're going to lose trade value in that sense. Then you need to decide which direction that you're going to go. And this is the most, to me, the 1-3 is the most where your top 3 is difficult, but the most dangerous is that one, because if you mishandle it, if you start trading away first and you get other depreciating assets, this team could be terrible with no assets positive that you can even start to trade and get anything of value back for. So you're in a really precarious situation there. I think that's where I start looking for downgrades, tier down trades, where it's I might trade
picks. Yeah.
I might trade Derrick Henry for Miles Sanders and some picks or something, right? I might still get some kind of something like that where I'm going to
hedging your bets.
Assets.
Yeah.
I'm going to get safe assets that aren't going to lose value.
Yep.
Right. I can bank those. That second next year is not losing value between now and then. It can't. It's only going to go up.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
like I want to bank some of that stuff, but then still like try to make sure I got some points on my team, if that makes sense.
I totally love it. Yeah, no. And Scott, are you in the same kind of boat? Like if you're 2-2 and I don't know, 8th in scoring, but you've had a really weird start to the season, is that something where you're panic selling? Or are you buying? Obviously, it's league dependent. There is no one answer, but I mean, just in general, what is your thought process when you're 2-2 and 8th in scoring?
So I mean, I'm stubborn. Like I'd rather someone die on my roster than I sell them for like 50% of value. Like I just can't. Like I'm not giving players away. Even if they do me no good. I've given an example before where I had this awful roster, and I mean it was just terrible. And I had Derrick Henry, and he was having a monster year. This was 2 years ago, and like why would we not trade this guy? Well, because nobody's giving me like anything. Like literally the offers were just atrocious. And I was like, you know what? No, they don't get him. I'm just going to hold. And then I ended up being able to trade him during the draft. And I ended up getting a haul because there's a team that, had a player that had a great run at the end of the season and whatever, right? And now they're feeling good about their team, and now it's not the season anymore. So they're willing to give up picks and all that. So just be patient. I'm far more patient. It's not easy to be patient when you're in 3 or 4 leagues, right? Because you might have that itch to do something, or you feel like you should be doing something. But for me, it's very easy to just be patient and say, you know what, I'd rather this guy die on my roster than just give him away for nothing. Like a 3rd round pick, the hit rate on a 3rd round pick just isn't worth it. I'm not going to just take any 3rd round pick for guys points or should be worth more than that. So
well, again, Scott, you're kind of chopping up there a little bit again. So I don't want to get point. Go ahead, Cal. Yeah.
I would like to just give the rebuttal to that if I can.
Yeah. I was actually going to say, I was going to do my own, but go ahead. Yeah. As the guest, your turn.
I gave you my 3rd and 4th category. My 5th one is if I'm 1-3 middle, 1-3 bottom 3, 0-4, 0-4 wherever, bottom 3 middle, like my plan is I'm selling off descending assets and I'm shedding points off my roster, because what you don't like, the thing that you don't factor in the trade that you make of Derrick Henry, if he's having a monster year, is that if points are your tiebreaker right after your record, then you could also be trading the 104 for the 102.
It cost me
as a part of that
the 101 by keeping him.
Yep.
Exactly. So instead of having that 101, you had whatever it was. And that to me, that has to be a part of the factor of that trade, is what you are, your position in the draft. And that's shedding those points from your roster when you're trying to rebuild is a big part of it. I know that like value wise, it sucks, but like, I just think that's the hidden part of a trade that like some of the really sharp guys like got me onto there for like how to think about that. And I really have come around to like, yeah, that really does make sense. And yeah, I hate getting rid of these guys that are scoring points that I love, because I'm going to get a 3rd round pick for Ezekiel Elliott. Like, I don't know, he let me do a title, man. Like, how am I going to, but like, that's just part of it.
Well, so again, to pivot on that too, like that is a prime case. Like I have Zeke in a couple leagues that I'm trying to score points, trying to win, or I'm 2-2 and 3-1, whatever it is. And 4-0, whatever, like trying to score some points. I'm not selling him for a 3rd in those leagues. But when I'm 0-4 and it's just like, you know what, maybe this helps that my 1st get better if I have my own 1st, which is always a caveat I like to ask to people when they're saying, hey, should I do this? Or I'm 1-4 or 1-6 or whatever. Like, well, first question, do you have your own 1st? Because I know I'm an addict. I trade all the time. I don't always have my own 1st, right? I trade my own 1st 3 years out all the time, and it makes the whole chaos becomes crazy. But like, I don't want to send Zeke for a 3rd. I can get a 2nd at least. I know I can. Nope, I can't. In this league, no one is giving me a 2nd, right? Like someone on Twitter will do it. That doesn't help you. It does not help you. And so you kind of have to really evaluate your league. And I think sometimes this is where it gets kind of like underrepresented in the market and like doesn't get talked about enough. But every league is so unique. Every league is so different. You kind of have to play everything to your league. Is your league active or not? Is your league paying attention or not? Is your league looking for running backs or not? Like if you only have to start one running back and it's flex after that, then Zeke even has less value, right? Like you're having to start him over players like, I don't know, like Michael Pittman and Deontay Johnson and all, Jerry Jeudy. And like, I'm probably going to start those guys over Zeke because I don't have to start anything but one running back. And I've already got Saquon Barkley. So I'm fine. Like, I don't need to worry about it. On a bye week, sure. That's 1 week. I'm not worried about it. So again, I just want to make sure that we're talking about this in a general sense, but being specific to the specifics. There is no one answer, right? And I think too, and again, maybe we can finish the segment on this because we got a lot to cover still. But if you're really stressing out, if you're 1-3, you're 2-2, you don't know what to do, hit us up on Twitter. Obviously, we all like to answer these questions. We all do this for a hobby and have a great time with it. And I'll be honest, I've answered a lot more questions in this last week than I did the last 3 weeks combined, because there are a lot more people that are like, okay, trades are now starting to happen, right? Week 1 and 2, you don't get a lot of trades. Everybody's kind of holding pat and seeing what's going on. Week 3, you start to get some, but week 4 is when people start to go, okay, oh crap, I'm out. I'm done. I got to move on. I got to bail. You start to see some crazy values of players. You got to see some things where, 3 months ago, we never would have seen. And it's just, it's a whole different world. And I think, take what Scott was saying, and he said before, don't be beholden to 3 months ago, right? Like as much as we want to spend the entire, I guess it's like 6 to 9 months in the non-point scoring season, living in that world, we're not in the world anymore. We have new data. We have to go with that new data. And I think at some point you have to realize I've got to make a move or someone else is going to beat me to it. And it all comes together, really. If you're 2-2 and you look at your league and you're 8th in scoring and you're like, listen, I had a fluky couple of weeks, but so did the whole league. If I'm the first to rebuild, I'm going to get the best deals on things. Maybe that's my best effort, right? I'm in a league full of sharp people that are going to do better than me. I'm out. I'm just going to rebuild. I'm just going to turn right now. And I think after 4 weeks, you kind of get that idea. And I think in your heart which way you need to go. And so it's funny because I always ask people this question, and I think people ask me this question more often even than that, like, which way should I go? And I go, which way should you go? Like, you know which way is the answer. Like, if you're feeling confident and happy about your team, let's go that direction. But if you're asking me questions like, man, I don't know, I feel like I should rebuild. There's your answer. Rebuild. Turn it around. And I think that's what I like about Dynasty more than redraft, because in redraft, if you're 0-4 in redraft, no offense, your league is, stomping you. You're done. Your season's kind of over. The only thing I will say to that, and the caveat is that, if you have high points or something, obviously you want to get some upside, try to win your money back, all this. But for the most part, if you're 0-4 in redraft, it's just, pack it in, enjoy the football and move on. Like, join a Dynasty league. I don't know. Like, it's just so much more fun because in Dynasty, you can send players for picks and like start to rebuild your roster in honestly in October and have a lot more fun with it. So I want to put a pin on that. I think that that's a good way to put it. There is no right answer. There is no wrong answer, but there are definitely some weird answers. And I think that there is no wrong way to play this. Just do what you think is the most fun. If you don't like rebuilding, don't rebuild. I'll just put it that way. There are plenty of players out there. Scott Connor is one of the best. He loves rebuilding. He loves turning his roster around. He loves the long game. He loves running backs. All that. Then if you're not that guy, don't be that guy, right? Let's just put it that way. Next segment we have coming up, which we haven't done much of, is listener league updates. We really do got to get into this. We've got a lot of great listeners that have been in our listener leagues. Dynasty Junkies 1 and 2. We've got the 2 of them going now. I wanted to update at least a little bit of where we are with this. Dynasty Junkies, the team, Dynasty Junkies 1, which is me and Rocky in League 1. We won both matchups because we had a doubleheader this week. We're 6-0 after week 4. 6-0, man. 6-0. Like we're good. We're good. We're sitting pretty. Scott's gonna come take us down, I'm sure, but we're good. We're doing all right.
Just give me
high score this week was by Beats by Ray, who started CEH, Eckler, Damian Pierce, Lamb, and Higbee, all of whom had great games, great weeks. We beat Gator Bitches and Sodali Tober, which are terrific team names. You guys are phenomenal. But we're in first. Gators Bitches is second, and I think that's what makes this even better. We beat the second place team. Funky Bunch is third at 4-2. Lots of time left, right? But this is a great league. DJ1 has been around for a few years. I took over with Rocky. I know, Scott, you've been in the league for at least 1 year, right? Weren't you in last year?
I took over an orphan last, I think, 6 months ago or something.
Yeah.
But wait. We need to now take Rocky off the Hawk bandwagon. Okay, he is no longer a Hawk truther. He is done. I'm sorry, Rocky. You have been removed from this title. I am the new Hawk truther on this podcast.
Well, I want to
Never
mention this
bench
because
TJ
we benched Hawkinson this week, and I gotta be honest, that was we regretted it, but we still won, so who cares, right? But I benched Hawk in a couple leagues because that team was just who knows what they're getting into. But man, I want to be on that Hawk truther train with you, Scott. But yeah, we benched Hawk. I'm not afraid to say it. We benched Hawk.
That was the best game of his career, so don't worry. It's all right.
I don't think it's gonna get any better. Let's be honest. That was probably his number one. Dynasty Junkies 2, which we drafted this. I think we drafted that this January, right?
Yes,
January, February.
Yes, correct.
And so me and Bobby have a team, and Rocky and Scott have a team. So Rocky and Scott defeated Drew's Cruise and are 4-0. So I guess tied for first in the league with Andrew Imber's team and Policy Gronks. Rocky and Scott doing great things.
That's the team.
Andrew and Bobby won against Aiming for 101, which tells you a lot about that team. And we're 2-2. And so we're 9th, and we have no idea what we're doing. Like, honestly, I think Bobby would agree with this. Like, we have won some games where I remember sending Bobby a message on a Sunday a couple weeks ago. I think it was week 2. I sent Bobby a message of like, so we're rebuilding, right? Because we were 0-1 and we just did not do well in week 2. And our team ended up squeaking out a victory. Like, we just had to threaten them a little bit, and they did all right. So now we're sitting here at 2-2. We're 9th. And it's a prime case of what we were just talking about. Like, well, which way do we go? Like, what is the thought process here? I'll be honest, we still don't know. I mean, Bobby's been a little under the weather. I've been busy as hell with real life. Like, this is how dynasty teams go sometimes. But Andrew Imber's team had the high score of the week. He had Goff, Higgins, Henry, and Kelsey all blowing up for him. So congratulations to you, Andrew. Appreciate you doing that. I think, honestly, Rocky's in the best spot here because he's in first in both leagues and undefeated. Sure. I don't know how he did it, but God bless him. Thank God he's not on the podcast to brag about it. But he will be editing this. And Rocky, good work? Question mark? I just want to put it that way. All right, so our last segment, which everybody is familiar with, we're going to do Find Me a Trade. We got to do this. It's been a couple of weeks. This week, I'm not going to pull up the roster because it's a sleeper league, which is wonky anyway. But this was submitted by Kenny Grady.
I have it up if you want.
Go for it. Yeah, at KG_2485. I'll go through the settings and you can talk about the team. So this league is League of Champions. It's a 10-team PPR with bonuses for long touchdowns. Now, I always like to mention those little caveats because sometimes that can change your calculus a little bit. It is a 2 QB, running back, receiver, tight end, 3 flex, 3 IDP, and a kicker. So again, you do have to start 2 quarterbacks, but then like one of everything else with some flex and some IDP. It's 25 roster spots and 1 IR. So for an IDP league with this few of a team, I think that's a pretty shallow league, but that makes for some very interesting choices, right? As everybody wants to be like, oh, it's not my league. My league's way deep. Those shallow leagues are way harder because now you have to decide who do I drop. You're not going to pick up Phillip Lindsay or Deion Jackson. You're not going to do that. You're not going to drop Jonathan Taylor. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to make these really odd decisions, and I think it's awesome. I love these 10-team leagues. So I'll get into the thoughts, and then I'll let Scott go through the roster. But it's a second-year dynasty with some of his friends. Made playoffs, but didn't get that far. Made trades for A.J. Brown and Aaron Jones so far. What else can I do to improve? Kenny, I got to be honest, this is a pretty good team. There's a couple weak spots, but Scott, go ahead and get into the roster, and we'll go from there.
All right, yeah, shout out to Kenny because I started looking at this league and the team names, and I was like, whoa, I think I'm in this league. And it turns out we're in a couple other leagues together, like a whole bunch of guys from this league. So Iron Eagle 24 and LaMurphy 57, Yellowwood 5000, Foreskins, always a great name. Philly diehard fan. So I think these guys are from the Philly area, if I remember right. So so Kenny has Josh Allen, Matt Stafford, and Daniel Jones at quarterback. Running back Nick Chubb, Jamal Williams, James Conner, Jeff Wilson, DeAndre Swift. Wide receiver Pittman, Debo, Evans, Landry, A-Rob, Osborne, Amon-Ra, Sun God, Kadarius Toney, Romeo Doubs, Wan'Dale Robinson, tight end Mark Andrews and Zach Ertz, and then a handful of IDPs, linebackers, which is typically what I do in my flex IDPs as well. So Holcomb, Edwards, Highsmith, Watt, and Leonard. So good group.
Solid,
of linebackers.
I want to say this too.
Most future picks, including some additional ones, except for 23 first.
Right. I want to say this too. I love when we get IDP leagues and I know the players on IDP. I'm always like, oh yeah, you got a good IDP. I don't need to worry about it. Because again, we're not an IDP show. I mean, again, as much as we love Dynasty and everything else, like I tell people all the time, like there are much smarter people than me in IDP. I don't hate the format. I just don't know it. But again, I think this team is pretty solid. I got to be honest, for a 10-teamer, I feel pretty happy about this. I mean, again, this is, it's the second year of this league and everything else. But Scott, do you want to get into yours first, maybe, and then I'll pivot into mine?
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing we're talking about right now is the time of year and what our records are and points and all that. And we have a screenshot of all the rosters. So I don't know what all the records are. I don't know what everybody's point situation is. So I'm just kind of taking an educated guess here. The thing about, for me, 10-team league, the smaller the league, the more emphasis on the stud players. The bonuses for long touchdowns, I almost kind of ignore it. I mean, maybe it's a tiebreaker if you're looking at a couple
it can be a tweak,
players,
but yeah, you shouldn't focus on it. I agree.
Yeah, I'm not really going to base major decisions on it necessarily. So in this case, with there only being a requirement of one running back, one receiver, I'm not going to worry too much about those spots. I'll just kind of fill in guys as needed, but I want 2 stud quarterbacks. And I don't know that this trade necessarily accomplished it because it's hard to trade for a stud quarterback, especially in the middle of the season. There's a particular roster that may be struggling because he has lots of injuries and some other things. Now he could be 4-0. I have no idea. It's a pretty good roster. But I just thought the only guy I could really identify would be Dak Prescott, maybe going after Dak and pairing him with Josh Allen. That is a pair that I have in a lot of leagues that has led me to success.
Not yet, but it will.
Yeah, and I don't know that this is that major of an upgrade, and it's a little bit of a risk, but I feel like this team can sustain. So my trade here is to move Matthew Stafford, which might be really hard to do right now. You might have to wait a week or two. But then again, Dak comes back. So move Matthew Stafford, James Conner, and a second to Team Yellowwood for Dak and Kamara. I know there's frustration with Kamara. I think people think he's toast, but he's definitely gotten the snaps when he's played. I think there's good things coming for him, a little bit of positive regression. You could say the same thing about Connor too. He's gotten a lot of the work. He just hasn't had the touchdowns or the catches like he had at the end of last season. So it's going to be a tough trade to pull off. And I'm not sure how much it really elevates, from Stafford to Dak. I don't know, but at least I'm gaining back about 5 years on that. And maybe getting at least that floor of Kamara that you can plug in. So it's one of those things. I just don't trust Connor. I've been kind of out on Stafford this season, even before we got going here. So just trying to do something a little bit different. If there's any way you can go after somebody other than Dak, like higher on the ranking list than Dak, I'd be all for it. I just don't see any opportunities with these current teams unless you find a team that's maybe 0-4 and wants to do something like that.
Yeah, I had the same thought too, and I didn't put it in the I made my notes here. I didn't put it in but I actually targeted the same exact team, the Yellowwood 5000. But I actually, so I had 2 trades that I couldn't do just one. I found 2 trades.
Love it.
And couple of them, like just real quick, like philosophically, kind of like you talked about there. Only starting one at those positions. So for me, that tells me like I go a little bit different than you in that like same type thing, but like I want wide receivers because like I would like to play one running back and that's it. And like I want to roster more running backs than wide receivers, but I want to have one good running back
or
on my team, maybe 2, but like that was the first thing that I noticed is there's quite a few of his running backs that he has right now that I would look to flip. Like Jeff Wilson jumps out to me. Like part of my methodology, if I have a running back who's a backup who gains value and I can get a second for him, I always do it. Always. So if I can get a second for Jeff Wilson, I'm going to do that. Now, I would prefer to do this first. So speaking of, it's not the one, the same guy as you, the Yellowwood, but and I ran this through the trade calculator, and it was really close. Trying to upgrade Jeff Wilson and Matt Stafford for Hollywood Brown and Treylon Burks. Now I'm going away from a quarterback in that trade. I'm going away from a quarterback in that trade, but here's why. In a 10-team league, it's not like, to me, quarterback is not as valuable because every team can roster 3. And they're all starters.
You have to start have that. It's not a super flex though. It is
but
2.
still.
But I still have Daniel Jones, and I have like other assets that I can try to use to trade for a quarterback.
I'm with you
from that point. So but that I get another wide receiver. So as I was looking through it, he can start 5 if I understand correctly with the flexes and all for his wide receivers.
Yep.
Is that right, or is it 4?
4.
4 receivers. Yeah, 4 receivers.
4. So if you got Pittman, Debo, Mike Evans, and then you go down to Amon St. Brown, there's a big drop off after that, right? So I want to add in, somebody else. And Marquise Brown to me is just way too undervalued, super disrespected. People, I've been arguing with strangers on the internet about that all week. But that's somebody that I am targeting. And if I Matt Stafford, I'm worried about. He's hurt right now. He is hurt. And I had the same thing with Dak, but I went a little bit of a different way. And I like your one with Dak. But when I was targeting the Yellowwood team, I thought, yes, there was some injuries, but I thought he had a really good team. Just maybe not as he's got McCaffrey. There's some questions about McCaffrey, right? He's got some running backs where it's he may feel uneasy about his running back position. He's got Kamara, he's got Akers, he's got Breece Hall there, but so I might keep Chubb, trade DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, put that package together and be here, you're protected, and come back and get Jalen Waddle and maybe George Pickens if I am good enough in my negotiation. Nice. Maybe I add a little something else to my side and just continue to beef up those wide receivers. I can always try to flip them, pair them together, upgrade if I need to, but wide receivers are going to maintain their value longer in Dynasty. I would build through wide receivers. And once I get to that place, then I would start to try to get 2 dominant quarterbacks. But I build there. He's got Andrews, doesn't need to worry about tight end. That's exactly keep him.
Right.
Flip some of these running backs if you can for round 2 picks. And there's probably others you can go pick up off the waiver wire. D'Ernest Johnson, who could get value later, or somebody like that. Who knows? But I don't even.
And then backfill. You can always buy a guy for a third who's going to give you a couple games. You can buy a Jeff Wilson, a D'Ernest Johnson, whoever guy is going to be starting for a couple games, you can throw out a third and pick those guys up. So run with that hero RB. Yeah, I love that.
Well, here, so that actually pivots perfectly into my trade, which I think is on the same page. When you only really have to start 1 running back, I don't need 4 running backs. I think running backs are too fragile. They don't hold value that long. So my first thought when looking at this team and looking at the rosters, and especially being a 10-team league, I don't feel as needed to hold on to the running backs like I do in 12 and 14 and beyond. You've got plenty of running backs. You can get a guy. You've already got James Conner on your roster. You've got Jamal Williams on your roster. You've got Jeff Wilson on your roster. You've got 4 running backs you could start if Swift is healthy. So my trade was, again, in the same page, sending Chubb and one of those bench receivers you're never going to start, no offense, Allen Robinson, Tony, and Wandale. All of those guys in 10-team leagues are probably on your bench, right? So Chubb and one of those bench receivers with potential upside to NG188 for AJ Brown. Let's just upgrade a solid receiver 1. Let's go get ourselves a stud receiver, partially to insulate yourself for the future, but also to score points. Let's be honest, AJ Brown's going to score you points this year. You're not giving up that much. You're giving up Chubb, which of course Chubb is a stud, don't get me wrong, but Chubb has a shorter shelf life than AJ Brown. If nothing else, in trade value alone, you could probably get AJ Brown. If you send AJ Brown next year, you could send AJ Brown for Chubb plus one of these guys again. But I don't think you could send Chubb plus these guys for AJ Brown. It's not going to be as easy. So I'm saying I would much rather have the AJ Brown side of that deal on my roster, especially at the way this is looking. I mean, wide receiver is the weakest position on this team, which isn't that doesn't say much. I mean, this is a pretty solid team. I got to be honest. Like you're pretty good to go here. But even with like Pittman, Debo Samuel, and Mike Evans, those are all like kind of wide receiver ones. Like those are guys that should be wide receiver one, but AJ Brown's your wide receiver one. Like you need a stud guy to focus on. If you can get somebody better than that, like Cooper Kupp or Justin Jefferson, by all means, go for it. I don't think these guys are getting moved. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I think AJ Brown's probably the cheapest of the guys that I think could be in that top 6 wide receiver category next year. And in a 10-team league, that's what I need to kind of focus on. And that was what I thought was missing on this team, because you got the Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews stack that we were talking about. Like you're fine at those positions. Even in start 2 QB, I don't like the idea of sending a QB if you have to start 2 and you only have 3. But you could easily get back a guy like Davis Mills or Geno Smith or Jared Goff, like one of those guys from a non-contending team when buys come around in week 6, 7, 8. Like you're not up against it. So I agree with you there, Cal. But I do think that sending a QB isn't the bad idea. I'm not saying it's a wrong move, but again, I was thinking he had Lamar. He's got Josh Allen. I'm sorry, but same logic. He's got Josh Allen as a stud quarterback. Again, my point is I would upgrade receiver, and I think Chubb's the guy to do that. I don't think Swift is the guy to move right now with the injury. I don't think you're going to get full value for him. Even if you pair him with Jamal Williams, I just think that's risky. And James Conner, you're not getting anybody back for that. And Jeff Wilson, you're not getting anybody back for that. But those guys could be starters for you, so I don't mind holding them. So that's kind of where my thought was, in theory. So anything on that, Scott, before we move on to the end of the show? Anything you want to move on to and kind of address for Kenny's team here?
No, I mean, I think, I'm always about building around the receivers. So that's a very common strategy for me. I'm in a 48-team league, the DDCL. That one's a lot of fun. And it's the same type of scenario, like starting lineup. And I basically just have like one running back and a whole bunch of receivers. And because I have Mahomes and Allen and Andrews, I mean, I've been in the championship, 2 out of the first 2 years in the league. So, that's definitely the way to go. Keep churning those running backs. And I mean, look to make moves, look for opportunities. There's going to be more injuries. There's going to be other misfortunes for the other rosters in the league. And so look for those opportunities, make some moves. I know at least half of those guys I'm in 2 other leagues with, so I know they're they're fun guys and they're cagey. Yeah. So it'll be fun. So yeah, I just put a message in our chat that we're doing that, so that should be fun. And I think before we sign off too, we should just we should get to recovering Ridley Truther's trade.
I wanted to, yes,
in the comments. Okay.
Yeah, so here's what Recovering Ridley Truther is a fan of ours. He's in a lot of these shows. He pays attention. I love it. Thank you, Recovering Ridley Truther, not Ridley Truther anymore. But he put us in the chat. If you get time, which why not? We'll do it now. Offer in the inbox, 12-team Superflex PPR, 2.5 tight end premium. Yes, 2.5, he says, because that is a lot. All-in contender in first. He's in first place. Cal, I'll start with you. Do you give your 24 first? Well, actually, not his, but do you give a 24 first, a 23 second, Conklin and Bateman, and get Diggs and Claypool? I mean, basically 2 top 3 receivers. What do you think on that one, Cal?
No, I don't. And it goes back to philosophy. If I'm all in, unless I'm 1 and 3, I am pretending my first don't exist, or I am waiting until they're at peak value for me trade-wise, closer to the trade deadline. Like there is, like, if you make this trade right now and you're an all-in contender, unless there's like a buy on the line or some reason why I have to do it, I just got to get in the playoffs and I want to be the best team later, not right now. So like I've got to get like really, really good value if I'm always willing to trade my first if I'm getting great value for it. I'm just not going to be, I got to go upgrade this right now. I don't want to be impatient. Like, especially if I'm a contender, if I'm winning, if I'm scoring points, like this is just philosophically not something I would do here. I don't think Claypool's good. I do think Diggs is good.
Alone.
Yeah, I do think Diggs is good, but that to me, like I'd want more if I'm giving up Bateman, who people still really love. He's only got 11 catches this year, and it makes me nervous. But like people love Bateman, he's going to have value. But to give up that first, even though it's 24, I like that it's not 23 at least. But no, I'm just not like Stephon Diggs can tear his ACL this week. I hope he doesn't, obviously, but like, or you could win the lottery and never want to play again, whatever you want to say.
Right.
But like, you just have more information 3 weeks from now, and that first isn't going to lose value. So just be patient, like have more information, upgrade a little bit later, unless you have a deal that is just a no-brainer, and this isn't it for me.
Well, I want to mention this, and you kind of hit on it. You're already in first. You're good. Just hold tight. I don't think there's a reason to make that move today. And I can't tell you, and I know, Scott, you and I have talked about this. I don't know how many times I've told people, why are we making that trade today? Mm-hmm. What is the benefit of making that move right now? What are you getting now that you can't get in a week? This trade could very likely be there in 3 weeks. Like the guys you're giving away, Bateman, in all honesty, Bateman could go up in value. The first is probably going to go up in value. Most 20, even a 24 first, going to go up in value, even if it's not yours. 23 second, going to go up in value. Conklin is kind of dominating right now, as much as people don't want to admit it. Like he's a redraft tight end that I think a lot of people are in Dynasty are just like, what do I do with him? And you're getting back Diggs, who, and no offense to Diggs, I think he is a stud receiver, but you don't need him if you're already in first. And then Claypool, who is a question mark of question marks. Like, what are we gaining here? I don't see the value bump. All of those guys are, all of the players you're sending are ascending assets. Even Conklin, to be honest. And then you get Diggs, who is maybe ascending, but I don't know how much higher he can get. And Claypool, who's descending. So the arrows are pointing in your favor. I don't make that trade. That's kind of where I'm at with it. And Scott, and just briefly, I guess, is that where you kind of are too?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is if you still want to do this, just do it in like 4 weeks and figure out where that, where that first
be 8-0 and make this
that
move,
team's doing,
right?
So.
Yeah, or be 6-2 or something like. Honestly, I would look at this too and say, like, maybe even cut out some of that chaff and just be like, what about 24 first for Diggs? Let's just cut through the crap. Let me keep Bateman. Let me keep the second. What does that move? Because again, it depends on what Diggs manager's roster is like. If the guy who owns Diggs here is 1-3 and looking to pivot and kind of go into a rebuild, hold him over a barrel. Why not? Like, what's the benefit to you? Like, hold on to your pick. Hold on to even if it's not yours, hold on to your pick because it's on your team, right? And this is kind of gets to that bigger question mark of like, well, what's the right philosophy or what's the way to? There's no wrong answer here. I will tell you that there are a number of times I've made a trade and then 2 weeks later look back and go, I'd much rather have had those players for the last 2 weeks because I now need them. Like I was contending, I'm doing great, but now I lost the last 2 weeks and I really would have rather had. So again, I don't think there's a necessary reason to give away ascending assets at this point in the season. We all kind of agree there.
What if in week 8, the guy that has Cooper Kupp is 3-5? Couldn't you see this trade for Cooper Kupp? A 24 first, a second, and Bateman and Conklin? That's
especially if, again, the trending assets, right? If Kupp goes, and again, I don't want to say anything about injuries. I'm not saying that, but let's say he has a bad week. Because again, that Rams offense is kind of weird right now. Like we all expected a Super Bowl hangover, right? As a Bengals fan, we saw it too. And the Bengals, like, it's starting off really weird and like not sure what to do with things, and they weren't playing in the preseason. But we're now through 4 weeks, and Kupp has done well. But what if that changes, right? What if something happens there where they go, hey, we don't know who we are, and we're pivoting to a rebuild in the NFL, And A-Rob has looked really odd, and they don't have Woods anymore, and then Kupp is the guy, but everybody's double teaming him. Like, so there's a number of ways that it's still too early in the NFL season to really make decisions on that. Now, fantasy, of course, is a shorter season, right? We play our whole season, including the playoffs during the regular season, so you got to make a move. But I think we're all on the same page. There's no reason to make that today. I don't hate it, but I wouldn't smash accept that. And I think I'm with you guys. If I'm contending and there's a pick involved and it's nothing but ascending assets, it's got to be a, over the top. Sell me on it. Make me smash accept on that. Like, I can't say no. And this isn't quite it. Now, if it was Kupp, I could see it. I could see it. All right. Well, with
through the trade analyzer on DLF for what it's worth, and not even including Conklin, the side with the players, the package side is worth more than Kupp right now.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks.
Okay.
A man of your brand, Cal. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you coming on tonight. This has been a great time. I want to make sure we give you a chance to talk about things and who you are, because we didn't really do it at the top of the show. But where can people find you? What are you doing for DLF? Go ahead, spend the next 30 minutes telling about all the things you're doing right now.
Well, Well, I coach a 10-year-old baseball team, and you can come out.
I like it. Let's start with that.
That's probably what I love the most. No, I get the opportunity to host a question and answer show where recovering really truther is often in the comments section. So great to see him there. And
nice.
He is somebody that asks a lot of questions, and we get a ton of them. And me and Addison Hayes and Tyler Karp go through and answer. Gosh, it was almost 3 hours last night, and it's great. It's Ask DLF. It's on Tuesdays. It was not last night. That was Peter's show last night. Excuse me. But the less good-looking show on DLF's YouTube channel. But no, and
front of the show. It's okay.
I've got some exciting news that I can't share yet, but there's some cool stuff.
Ooh, okay.
Well, so wait, where should people follow you on Twitter for this exciting news?
At Calvin and Hobby.
Perfect.
I'm excited about it.
I wonder how many of our listeners get that. You know what I mean? Like, I knew it immediately when I saw your name. Like, but am I old? Like, I
gotta be a lot, right?
Whatever, it doesn't matter. Yeah, probably.
Calvin Hobbs, amazing. But with that, again, Cal, thank you so much for coming on. Mr. Scampers here in the chat saying tease, of course. Totally agree, Mr. Scampers. But you can't tell everything at once. Totally get that. But again, Cal, thank you so much for coming on tonight. This has been a lot of fun. I know we got through a lot of good stuff here. I think hopefully we helped some people out. I know I keep saying it, but I'm going to keep saying it because there is no one answer. If you have a question, hit me up on Twitter. Hit Cal up on Twitter. Hit Scott up on Twitter. We all have a bunch of times that we answer questions. We do our best. We get to the DMs. I mean, I'd much rather get into a back and forth with somebody about their team and their league than just get like, hey, who do I start X or Y? And I'm like, I don't know why. You know, it's like, here's the quick answer. Like, I get why that exists. I'm not upset with those people that do that. I am much more a fan of, are you contending? What kind of team do you have? Do you have a lot of running backs? Do you need, or is your depth okay? You know, we're not even into the bye weeks yet. Like, let's be honest, there's going to be a crazy few weeks here when we start to have 6 teams on a bye. And we're going to have to start making crazy decisions with injuries on top of that. So I just always want to say to people, like, now is the chance to solidify your roster. Do what you can before it gets wonky. Do everything in your power to make it easy. That's all I'm going to say, because it's not going to be easy as we get through the stretch. But again, Cal, thank you so much for coming on. Really a big fan of yours. Glad you could make it time for us this week. We also, obviously, we got a lot to get through here as we finish. My Twitter handle at Andrew Hall FF. We got Scott_Sidlow at Scott_Sidlow at Portfolio Dynasty. If you want to look him up on Twitter. The other 2 guests, like you said the other week when I listened to Scott, like, they'll deal with it later. Who cares? Like Rocky put it, like, just whatever. Doesn't matter. Anything you didn't like about tonight's show, blame Rocky or Bobby because they're not here, and that's perfect. Any inaccuracies that we might have stated, we're blaming them. It's perfect. Follow us at Dynasty Junkies. Errors and omissions, exactly. At Dynasty Junkies, hit us up. We have a lot of Find Me a Trades. We still have a bunch of things to get through. But if you've got a league and you've got a team and you just don't know what to do with it, come on down, send your team in. It's the pinned tweet on Dynasty Junkies. It's in my link tree on my Twitter as well. We love taking in submissions on that. We always need more. Anytime you got a question, come on, hit us up. At DAP_network, the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, of course, on YouTube. Look us up, find us. Watch us during halftime and the second half of this boring snooze fest of a game, which is 9-6 right now in the fourth quarter. And I don't even know what to talk about for fantasy. This is going to be hilarious. But for the next 3 days, we're all going to try to scrape together some things and be like, it's exciting. But Scott, I'll kick it to you to say hi to the fans in the chat and everything, and then send us out of here.
Yep. As always, want to thank everyone who joined us. Appreciate you jumping in the comments and definitely submitting your questions, submitting your FMETs, all those. We want to get those in. Let's keep them rolling. We'll keep this one short and sweet because Andrew is a big star now and he has other obligations. So
it's not entirely true, but I appreciate it.
Andrew Hall, I'm Scott Sidlow. Junkies out.